She was the quiet one, the one who always remembered your name, who could find any book, even if you only remembered the color of its cover, the librarian who made space feel safe. She never raised her voice, never forgot a birthday, and always smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Everyone in the retirement home loved her. Everyone thought they knew her, but no one really did, because 72-year-old Margaret Lane wasn't just a librarian. She was a ghost from a war that never officially happened. A woman erased from every file, denied by every agency, and forgotten by every government she served. Until now. Welcome to Echo Stories, where we share the untold lives of the quietest heroes, the ones who were never meant to be remembered. If stories like this move you, subscribe and stay with us. Today's story might change the way you look at the people you pass by every day. Margaret had worked in the small community library inside Rosewell Retirement Home for over 20 years. She came after her husband died, though she never talked much about him, or about anything personal, really. She organized readings for children on weekends. She remembered the names of every nurse in the building. She taught creative writing classes on Tuesdays and crossword puzzle workshops on Fridays. And every day at 4 p.m., she made tea, real tea, not the instant kind, for the residents who wanted to talk about something other than aging and prescriptions. People adored her. No one asked about her past. She seemed too gentle, too steady, too predictable to be anything but what she appeared. Just Margaret. Just the librarian. Until one afternoon in April, when a nursing student named Cara Millen, volunteering at the home, pulled a book off the shelf and noticed something strange. Inside the back cover of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, someone had penciled a small series of numbers and letters, XH438, IROPREDVIOLET, redacted. Cara, whose father had worked in counterintelligence, recognized the formatting immediately. It looked like an old NATO field code, something from the Cold War era. Probably just a coincidence, she thought. Maybe a joke by a bored clerk. But when she asked Margaret about it, the woman's reaction was unsettling. Margaret went still. Her hand trembled slightly. She closed the book, placed it gently on her lap, and said, "Some stories stay buried for a reason." Then she stood up and left the room. That night, Cara couldn't sleep. She looked up the code. Found nothing. She tried the call signs. Still nothing, but she couldn't shake it, not just the note, but the look in Margaret's eyes. The next day, she returned to the library and started asking quiet questions. Had Margaret ever mentioned where she was born? Number, did she have children? Number, any military history? She doesn't seem the type, one nurse said. She's so calm. But the more Cara searched, the less she found. Margaret Lane didn't exist before 1984. No tax records, no employment history, nothing before a public librarian ID issued in Minnesota that year. Everything prior to that was blank. Cara was fascinated, obsessed even. She brought in her professor, who happened to be researching Cold War tradecraft. He said it wasn't uncommon for agents, especially female operatives, to be buried under new identities after certain types of missions. Red Violet could have been a protocol, a code for extraction, or for erasure. He laughed, half-jokingly. Maybe your sweet old librarian used to break into embassies. 2 days later, Cara returned with an old photo. She had dug through some declassified archives, scanned old training manuals from the CIA, and found a training group photo from 1978 taken in Berlin. It was grainy, but in the back row, half-shadowed, stood a woman with Margaret's eyes. She showed it to Margaret without a word. The older woman took one look at it and closed the door behind them. And for the first time in over 40 years, Margaret Lane began to talk. She had been born Margareta Lang, the daughter of a German factory worker and an American nurse. After the war, her family fled to Austria. In 1956, at age 10, she was orphaned during a riot and placed in a U.S.-sponsored shelter. A few years later, she was offered a scholarship to a special exchange school in Maryland. But it was no ordinary scholarship. She was being watched, groomed. By 20, she spoke English, Russian, German, and Polish. By 23, she was working in Berlin, not as a translator, but as a handler. Her job was to recruit local assets, East German scientists, bureaucrats, and guards with a weakness. Money, freedom, love. Everyone had something. She wore scarves instead of guns. She memorized floor plans instead of carrying maps. She never used her real name. Her code name was Ava Reed. Margaret never glorified it. She didn't smile while recounting the details. Her voice stayed steady, almost clinical. She described missions like someone listing items on a grocery receipt, impersonal, necessary. She recalled one operation where she had to seduce a mid-level Soviet informant for 6 months just to gain access to one coded message drop site. Another time, she had to poison a colleague's wine just enough to cause a fainting spell, buying time to break into a Stasi records vault. No one died, she said flatly. Not directly, anyway. The last mission she ever took was in 1981. A scientist named Dr. Lutz Braun had developed an early encryption algorithm that could compromise NATO communications. The Soviets wanted him. The Americans needed him. Margaret's task was to get him out, along with his wife and 9-year-old daughter. The plan was precise. The extraction window was 14 minutes. A fake delivery truck, a forged checkpoint pass, a quiet night in Leipzig. But something went wrong. A double agent, someone inside the American team, tipped off the opposition. When Margaret arrived at the pickup point, there were flashing lights and shouting. Someone had fired a gun. She barely got them into the truck, gunned it through a barrier, and drove straight into a checkpoint with no clearance. They made it, but that stunt cost her everything. The agency pulled her out, changed her identity, told her to disappear. Eva Reed was too exposed. Margaret Lane was born, a quiet librarian with no past. She never saw the bronze again. She never knew what happened to the man who betrayed her team. She lived the next 40 years organizing book clubs and reshelving spy thrillers written by men who never lived what she had. Her closest friends knew her as Maggie the Tea Lady. She smiled. She nodded. She survived, but she never forgot. Kara left Margaret's room that evening in stunned silence. The fluorescent hallway lights felt harsh after everything she had just heard. It was like walking out of a movie into the real world. Only the real world suddenly seemed too small for the weight of the truth she now carried. She couldn't stop thinking about it. About Eva Reed. About what it meant for someone to give up their entire life, their name, their future, for a country that never intended to remember them. That night, she pulled out her laptop and began writing. Not an article, not a report, a story. The way Margaret had told it. Careful, detailed, human. She changed names. She added just enough ambiguity to protect identities, but the bones of the truth were there. She posted it anonymously to a Cold War history forum with a simple title, The Librarian in Room 213. She didn't expect anything, but within 48 hours, the post had over 20,000 views. Within a week, it had been translated into 3 languages, and someone, she never found out who, forwarded it to a retired intelligence officer who had served in Berlin in the early 80s. That man forwarded it to a journalist, and suddenly, Kara's inbox exploded. Reporters wanted interviews, researchers requested names, publishers offered book deals. Even the BBC reached out. Kara was overwhelmed. She hadn't asked for this. She just wanted to understand who Margaret really was. She went back to the retirement home. Margaret was sitting in the library, sipping tea, reading the paper like nothing had changed. Kara sat across from her, laptop in hand. "I think I might have started something," she said. Margaret didn't look up. "Then you'd better finish it properly." Over the next 2 weeks, Kara helped Margaret record everything. Names, locations, missions, as much as she could remember. She was meticulous, almost cold in the way she recalled events. But sometimes her voice faltered. When she spoke about the bronze, when she described watching a fellow operative die in silence to protect a cover, when she admitted she'd once faked a breakdown to avoid a loyalty test, Kara asked, "Do you regret it?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. She stared out the window, where a young couple was planting flowers in the garden below. "I regret the things I never said," she replied. The media story broke a week later. Not in a major network, but in a mid-sized investigative outlet known for war archives and intelligence deep dives. The headline read, "Retired Librarian Revealed as Cold War Operative Erased from History." The article was respectful. It didn't name her directly, but it was enough. 2 days after it went live, Margaret received a letter stamped with no return address typed in monospace font. You were never meant to be remembered, but we are watching. Stay quiet. Kara was furious. She wanted to publish it, expose the cowardice. But Margaret simply folded the paper and placed it in the back of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. They won't touch me now, she said calmly. It's too late. They're not afraid of me. They're afraid of what I represent. A week later, a small package arrived. Inside was a faded black and white photograph, a man, a woman, and a child, standing on a sunny lawn. On the back it read, "We made it. Thank you. Lutz, Anna, Clara." Margaret pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't cry, but Kara did. The story kept spreading, quietly, carefully, like a candle passed hand to hand. In veterans' forums, in intelligence archives, in corners of the internet where names like Ava Reed still carried meaning. One day, Margaret received a phone call, a woman's voice, thick with age but steady. "You carried my baby out of Berlin. She has 2 children now. I wanted you to know. She still folds her napkins into birds." Margaret didn't speak. She just listened. And when the call ended, she whispered, "I'm glad." That spring, Margaret's health declined. She never said the word cancer, but Kara knew. The way she winced getting up, the slight shake in her hands, the new prescriptions tucked discreetly into her desk drawer. She never complained, never said goodbye. One morning in May, Kara entered the library and found Margaret asleep in the reading chair, a book open on her chest, glasses slipping down her nose. She didn't wake up. There was no drama, no scene, just peace. Her memorial was small, exactly as she wanted. No church, no eulogy. Just a quiet gathering in the garden among the flowers she had helped plant. Kara spoke. A few residents did too. Someone played a recording of Margaret reading poetry, her voice strong and calm, like always. After the service, Kara walked back into the library and pulled Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy off the shelf. Inside, behind the cover, was a folded paper. The note, "You were never meant to be remembered." "But you are," she smiled. A month later, a package arrived at Kara's apartment. No sender listed. Inside, a sealed envelope marked "For publication, if you choose." A red silk scarf and a brass library tag. M. Lane, Archives section. Kara published the envelope's contents, unedited, in an online journal titled Echoes of the Cold. It included Margaret's full written testimony, dates, places, code names. But most importantly, it included a final paragraph that read, "I did what I was asked. I disappeared so others wouldn't. My name doesn't matter. But if someone out there remembers what I did, then that's enough." The article went quietly viral. It never made the front page of any major news outlet. No headlines, no national recognition. But in the forums, in the research archives, in the unofficial channels of people who used to serve, Margaret's name became a whisper of reverence. Former analysts commented with simple words like, "I believe this," or "Finally." One user posted a photo, a folded napkin bird set on a library desk, captioned, "For Eva." Kara didn't chase fame. She didn't monetize the story, but she kept receiving emails, letters, some from people claiming to know Margaret during her service years. One from a woman in Prague who said Margaret once saved her brother from arrest. Another from a retired agent who remembered a handler with fire in her eyes and ice in her veins. They all ended their messages with the same idea. We never forgot her. On the anniversary of Margaret's death, Kara returned to Roswell. She sat in the garden, alone, holding a single origami bird. She placed it on the empty bench outside the library, the one Margaret always used. Then she walked inside. The library hadn't changed much. The same books, the same smell of paper and time. But the chair where Margaret used to sit was now marked with a small brass plate. Eva Reed, Margaret Lane. She remembered everyone. No one knew who had installed it. Kara went on to become a historian. She didn't specialize in espionage. She focused on unseen women of history. Margaret became her first lecture, her first book, and the root of her career. And every year, on the same day, she returned to the place it all began. She never brought cameras, never gave speeches. She just sat, read a book, made tea, like Margaret. In 2025, a new exhibit opened at a private intelligence museum outside Langley, Virginia. The final room of the exhibit, A small, dimly lit space titled The Unnamed held only 4 items: a red silk scarf, a library ID, a worn-out paperback spy novel, and a single line printed in clean, elegant type. Some of the loudest acts of courage are performed in silence. The curators refused to say who the room was for, but anyone who knew, knew. There's no grave with Margaret's name, no official commendation. Her files remain sealed, but her legacy lives in footnotes, in whispers, in the folds of paper birds left on library desks across the country. Students at Rosewell now fold them in memory. New volunteers are told the story by older nurses. She wasn't just a librarian. She was someone important. One evening, Kara received a final email. It had no subject line. The body read, "She would have hated the attention, but I think deep down she'd be glad someone listened." Attached was a photo. A young girl, no more than 5, sitting in a library with a folded paper bird in her hand, smiling at the camera. Caption: "Her name is Margaret." Some people serve loudly, some serve in silence, but the weight of sacrifice is never measured by volume. Margaret Lane lived quietly, loved fiercely, and served without the promise of recognition. Her story reminds us that some heroes don't need medals, they just need to be remembered. If this story moved you, subscribe to Echo Stories. Let's make sure the forgotten are never truly lost.